Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Any regular listener of this podcast knows that one of my favorite people in the world is author and human guinea pig AJ Jacobs. He has done some of the most awesome things with his time on Earth. He has spent an entire year living according to the Bible. He has read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, that is 33,000 very dense pages in tiny font, in an attempt to acquire vast amounts of knowledge and write about it. He's also written about identifying over 1,000 people who played a part in his morning cup of coffee. Think about it. The coffee farmer, the cup maker, the truck drivers, and everyone else, and thanking those people personally. AJ has pulled off so many incredible stunts and written about them in his quest for knowledge, appreciation of life, and his desire to share his joy in these pursuits. AJ holds the record for the most time guesting on Super Psyched. This will be his fourth, and this time we talk about the power of curiosity and gratitude. As I see it, these are two seemingly unrelated cousins that have a lot to do with each other, and leaning into each can vastly improve our lives. So listen in as AJ and I talk about the power of curiosity and gratitude. AJ Jacobs, welcome back to Super Psyched.
I love being whatever it is, the Alec Baldwin or Steve Martin of SNL to the...
You're definitely the Alec Baldwin or Steve Martin or Paul Simon as it relates, or John Goodman as it relates to SNL as it's for Super Psyched.
Delighted to have that.
So one of the things that I was telling you offline is that I don't just read your books, I choose to reread them. I actually have taken up the practice of rereading my favorite stuff. Over the summer, I read for the fourth time The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Luis Zafón, my favorite piece of fiction of all time. I read and reread you, and I've also mentioned that there is research that shows that if you read something that is mildly humorous to humorous when going to sleep, that makes you feel good, kind of akin to watching something like, I don't know, The Office or Parks and Recreation, something that's smart, that has humor and kindness imbued in it, it is soporific. It helps us fall asleep. And it's a much better thing to watch or do than, say, watching or reading Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad, as you might imagine. Not great for the cortisol production because it will actually increase and cause poor sleep. Whereas you have hit the sweet spot of being both kind and funny and the perfect thing to read and reread before sleep. And I just reread Thanks 1,000. And as I was doing so, I found myself thinking about yours and my coming together and the small actors that participated in us converging. And
I love that. Tell me more. Who were some of the actors?
So
I remember you reaching out a couple of times, and I loved making the video for your book group. Let's do some gratitude work. Why not?
Let's do some gratitude work since it's so good for us. And the forces of nature that had to come together for you and me to meet. I'm not going to go all the way to my birth, but I'll say I married Orion. I got a dog. These are all relevant to you and me actually coming together. I moved to San Jose. I had my son, Avon, and these all relate. I walked my dog around the block many times. And in so doing, while walking dog and my son, I met Sarah, who would become his babysitter. Sarah would later introduce me to her mom, who said, "Hey, you've got to read AJ Jacobs." And I said, AJ Jacobs? Well, that's my father-in-law's name. That's interesting. This is 2005, by the way. And I read The Know-It-All, and I am dying. I am laughing my head off. I mean, it had me at the Jon Stewart endorsement at the back of the book, but I start reading it and I read it twice. I had lunch with my buddy Stuart. This all relates. He tells me he's in a book club. I tell him I want to join. I recommend an AJ book to the book club. And to make the experience better, I had the chutzpah to ask you to, by email, to greet the guys in the book club COVID hits, I ask you to guest on Super Psyched. You and I hit it off. My wife says, you guys have the best chemistry ever. That's how it happened.
I love it. Well, I want to write a note to Sarah and Sarah's mom. They're heroines. Thank you for introducing me to Adam. It is a delightful coincidence that I am the second AJ Jacobs in your life.
Yes.
So,
and the original AJ has got to be smiling somewhere, knowing that there's another AJ Jacobs and that it was Kismet that brought us together. You cited Italo Calvino and these invisible cities and these threads, these things that bring us all together. And I think it's a really important practice. One of the things you and I are going to be talking about is cultivating curiosity. And one of the ways that we can actually feel more grateful is through the practice of curiosity and recognizing, like almost like Sherlock Holmes looking for good. Like, what were the forces that were necessary to bring me here? One of the things I heard Arnold Schwarzenegger speaking about is he really wants to disabuse people of the idea that he did it alone.
I love that. That one, I actually have a little section in Thanks 1,000 on that. One of the things I said was books are very deceiving because they've got by AJ Jacobs on the cover. And it really should be a list of like 50 people, the copy editor, the designer, the people who made the paper. I definitely could not write these books alone. They really are a team. So I'm delighted to hear that Arnold Schwarzenegger thinks that as well. No one does anything alone. And the delusion that you have to be this like individual, self-sufficient is just wrong and harmful, I think.
Couldn't agree more. And even though Barbara Streisand sings that song, People Who Need People Are the Luckiest People in the World, we know that everybody needs people. And it's, the fool who doesn't believe so. I was just watching a Kurt Vonnegut movie on Hulu. I don't know if you've seen it yet. Fantastic. Highly recommended.
Love Kurt Vonnegut.
He says, surround yourself by people. We need people. We need people. He said, even if they're morons, surround yourself with people. We still need people. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of surrounding yourself with morons because I do think we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So I'd rather, but we do need people. And I love that you mentioned that. And at the end of any movie, you'll see in the credits a basic parade names of people. And now writing my own book, I'm realizing, it's going to have my name on the title, but on the cover, but there are so many people. And
I often think it would be interesting if everything had credits. So like this microphone, if I could just see the credits of all the people who made it happen. The miner in Chile who went and got the copper from it. I'd like to see that. Because, why do movies? Why do they have credits and nothing else?
Entirely. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your relationship with curiosity and how it's evolved over the years. And by the way, folks, before I do, one of the reasons I bring up this exercise is in Thanks 1,000, AJ basically thanks 1,000 people for his morning cup of coffee. And he traces everybody who might have had even the smallest part in participating in getting his cup of coffee, which was in response to a very great moment that he had with his son, who, when he was saying thanks for his meal, his son said, "They can't hear you." And so AJ took a page out of that book and decided to write a book about thanking over 1,000 people for his morning cup of coffee. Well, let's get into your you've put yourself through so many stunts. I've read all your books, at least twice, actually, now that I think of it. Let's get into it. Let's talk about relationship with curiosity in and of itself.
I would say those are my two, I don't know if they're emotions or drives or characteristics, but gratitude and curiosity are my two favorite characteristics. And I try to cultivate them. They don't come necessarily naturally to me. Certainly not gratitude. I think I am more naturally curious, but I think those are two really crucial drives in our happiness. I might have told you this already, but I remember I interviewed Alex Trebek, the late great Alex Trebek from Jeopardy, for Esquire magazine. And he had this quote that I always remember, and I love it, even though it doesn't totally make sense. His quote was, "I'm curious about everything, even things I don't care about." And I was like, that's perfect. Me too. I am curious about everything, even those things that are seemingly boring, because once you dig in, nothing is boring. So that has really enriched my life. And it's also, as you know, my last book was about puzzles and my new podcast is about puzzles. And that is the basis of puzzles, is all about curiosity and cultivating that. And you, of course, are I can tell just from listening to your delightful podcast how curious you are. And I think that's going to save us. That's the only thing that can save us is right now is being curious about and listening to people we disagree with. Otherwise, we're screwed.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I love that Alex Trebek quote. You and I both really do. Now, as you're speaking it out loud, I would say probably two of the things that we care about most, two of the values we hold highest are curiosity and gratitude. And we try to live through those spaces every day. And Martin Seligman and his team of social scientists came up with 24 virtues. Character strengths is what they called them. CSV, character strengths and virtues. And two of those that have been valued throughout time, throughout religions, throughout countries and cultures have been curiosity and gratitude. And by finding novel ways to rock those, it's been shown through massive amounts of research that we will live happier lives. But you're actually speaking to something that may be the salvation of an existential threat, and that is looking at our problems through the lens of puzzling and curiosity. And you speak about that in The Puzzler, about looking at the problem externally and maybe two people who are on opposing sides, looking at the problem together as if it were a puzzle that they are mutually solving. I was wondering if you could speak to that and how curiosity could actually save our lives.
I actually don't quote him in the book because I read this quote right after I finished writing. But Quincy Jones, the great musician, has a quote where he says, I don't have problems, I have puzzles. That is his life philosophy. So instead of seeing his life as a series of problems, he's like, oh, this is, it could be marital puzzles. It could be financial puzzles. It could be social puzzles. But I love that because that reframe is so key because, problems are so thorny and depressing and stressful. But puzzles, like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's solve this. And it's just a much better way to look at these challenges. I used to when I disagreed with someone. So I grew up in New York City. I'm on the Upper West Side. So I'm like a default liberal. Not on everything, but, in general, I have more of a liberal. But I know a lot of smart people who I respect who are not. And I used to, if I had a discussion with them, I would try to beat them. It was like a competition. I was going to try to berate them, give them my facts, and make them see the light. That just does not work. It does the opposite. It polarizes, and then they get defensive and nothing gets accomplished. So instead, I was like, let me try to reframe these arguments as puzzles. So what if I was talking to someone on the other side of the political spectrum, and I said, let's try to solve this together. Why do we disagree? What is it that we actually disagree about? What evidence is there that you can show me or I can show you to try to change our minds? And if we can't, what can we do? What can we agree on? How can we move forward? All those are interesting puzzles. Makes it much less stressful and more of almost a game that you're in an adventure you're in together to try to solve this puzzle. And it has improved my life because, before I would just have these arguments and I would get frustrated. The other person would be frustrated. Nothing would come of it. This is a much better way to go about it. I'm not saying I've solved any of the massive problems we have, but it is just, if we are going to do it, this, I think, is the secret.
It's wonderful when things rhyme and you talk about curious and not furious. And I think that's a really important thing. I have also heard another rhyme, connection rather than correction. And I find myself thinking about Daryl Davis, the great musician who also is an African-American person who found his way talking with KKK members and other hate groups and just getting curious with them, not trying to bludgeon them with the truth, kind of the way that many of us do, but by getting to know them and just having a really intelligent dialogue and helping them see what they value and how perhaps participating in a hate group may not actually be connected to their truest values. Over 200 of these individuals gave their robes to Daryl. And I wouldn't have believed it.
What's his name? Daryl?
His name is Daryl Davis. And someone who actually
That's
has
amazing.
Given a blurb on your book, at least once, Adam Grant out of Wharton, he talks about Daryl Davis in Think Again and I remember thinking to myself, there's no way this guy actually exists. This has got to be like somebody who exists out of Hobbiton with Bilbo Baggins and wizards. Through my friend, a former neo-Nazi, he said, oh yeah, I know him and I'll hook you up. And Daryl Davis has been on my podcast. He's worked alongside me. You would absolutely love him. And it's become one of the more popular of my, but he did it exactly the way that you are endorsing.
Well, I love to hear that. Yeah. Oh, by the way, can I just say, not all rhyming phrases are, if the glove don't fit, you have to acquit.
That's exactly where my brain goes. It's like,
yeah, you don't have to acquit. You don't have to acquit. You can still, there's other evidence. But I'd be interested to hear, because you know more about this than I do. But I do know one other rhyming one that I love, which is comparing leads to despairing. Comparing leads to despairing. Because if you're always comparing yourself, like I'm never going to be Stephen King, I'm never going to sell them any books. And so if I'm always comparing myself to him, I'm always going to be despairing. So I try to remember that. Don't be always measuring up against, I'm sure like whoever, Jeff Bezos is number 2 now, and he's comparing himself to Elon Musk. He's going to be despairing. He should be happy with his $342 billion or whatever he has. So anyway, that was one. Do you have any other rhyming?
Well, first of all, I want to just agree with you. There are well over 200 known cognitive biases, and one of them is that we tend to see it as more salient if it rhymes. So if the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Right.
Was brilliant by Johnny Cochran because it was catchy and it becomes an earworm, almost like It's a Small World when you stand in line at It's a Small World. You hear it for the rest of the day. It's called a cognitive after image, and it's not great if it's something like It's a Small World or Baby Shark. But to your point about social comparison, I mean, it is a surefire way of us feeling awful. I roll in to my driveway with my new Hyundai SUV and my neighbor shows up in his Mercedes SUV and I think, oh man, what am I doing with my life? What we appreciate appreciates. This we know. And I like that. And it
rhymes because it's the same word.
It rhymes.
It's like you can't get a better rhyme than that.
You can't get a better rhyme than if what we appreciate appreciates. And
love it.
I make it a daily practice to lean into what I've got. And I remember Matthew McConaughey's Academy Awards speech when he won, and some people thought he was a little bit off his rocker.
Off the hook, I thought it was the rails,
brilliant. I thought what he said was brilliant because he basically uses himself as his basis of comparison. And I think that we're all called to do that. All you can do in this lifetime is be the best AJ you can be. You're never going to be Steve Kerr. You're never going to be Steph Curry. As much as you want to practice basketball, it's not happening. So if you go through that life, I think Einstein said something like a fish will think it's an idiot if it tries to mountain climb or something like that. We're meant to lean into what we're good at and compare ourselves to ourselves and hopefully be better today than we were yesterday and recognize that it's a marathon and not a sprint and that I may lose a little bit of yardage today, but it's a long game. So
I love it. Wait, can I play devil's advocate against myself? Because I do find it helpful sometimes. And I want to know your thoughts in terms of gratitude, using comparison as a tool. So thinking I was born now, we've got a lot of problems. But if I were born 300 years ago, first of all, I'd be dead. Like I'm 55. I'm like way past I would be surgery without anesthesia. Those 3 words always remind me. The fact that I was born in America and the fact that I was born human as opposed to like whatever, a bacteria or an elk on the Serengeti because I wouldn't be one of the alpha males. I would be the one butting heads with the other males while the alpha male got to have sex with the herd. That's not a good life. So I do try to remember that if I'm going to compare, like don't compare myself to Jeff Bezos, compare myself to 99.9% of human history and the world. And that sometimes is helpful in terms of gratitude. So what is that? Is it a paradox that sometimes comparing doesn't lead to despairing?
So you make a really good point. And one of the things that Sonia Lyubomirsky talks about is if you find yourself eye rolling during a gratitude exercise because you think it's corny, don't do it. Instead, find ways to look at what went well, or perhaps think about the kind of moment in Young Frankenstein when Marty Feldman says it could be worse, could be raining. Like, think about what could be worse. And you're kind of going with, I'm going to call it Seth MacFarlane meets Robert Sapolsky, as unlikely as these two names are. Seth MacFarlane created this great movie called A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Oh, I never saw that.
It was really, really funny. And for some reason, a lot of people haven't seen it. So if you love The Family Guy and you like Seth MacFarlane, you got to see A Million Ways to Die in the West. But there were a million ways to die in the West, to your point. And the idea of surgery without anesthesia, are you kidding me right now? Yeah.
Oh my God.
I would also have died very young. And Robert Sapolsky talks about how bad it is to be a third tier baboon. Like, if you're going to be a baboon, you kind of want to be the alpha who's getting all the women and at the top of the chain. And to your point, yeah, we're very fortunate. So one of the back routes to gratitude, to your point, is thinking about comparing to, well, at least I don't have this. And this morning, it was really funny. I often think about the fact that I have a hot shower. That's a big deal. And the reason I think about the fact that I've got a hot shower, and I try not to forget about it, and I nearly did this morning, but I was reminded because I thought the water heater had broken. It hadn't. All you need to have is one of these cold showers. And if you're not a Wim Hof aficionado and not used to taking cold stuff, a cold shower kind of sucks. And we in this first world forget that most of the world doesn't have running water, let alone a hot shower. And so the back route into gratitude is recognizing how good we have it relative to others in this way, as well as relative to our ancestors.
I love that. And the water one reminds me, sometimes I think I said this in Thanks 1,000, is that maybe we shouldn't think glass half full, glass half empty. We should be amazed that we have any water in the glass at all, even if it's like 10%. Just the fact that we could turn this metal knob and get clean, drinkable water is really miraculous and did not happen for 99.9% of human history, and still is not something available to billions of people on Earth. So yeah, we shouldn't be all half glass full, half empty. We should just be like, wow, we got water.
100% agreed. And the fact that we have water and it's so readily available is incredible. And we have this competing part of our brain that kept us alive for centuries, or millennia, I should say. And that is the negativity bias. And thank God we have it. The problem with it today is it causes us to over-index on what's not working. And Louis C.K., I know he's kind of fallen out of favor with many people, but he had a great joke about being able to use Wi-Fi on an airplane.
Oh, I remember that story.
Remember that one?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
And how the technology had only been available for like a day and people were already pissed that it wasn't working. And he's thinking, here we are, not being the Donner Party, basically able to go from New York to San Francisco in, 5-6 hours. First of all, that's a miracle of flight. Second of all, having a device that can actually connect to anything, sometimes even, is also a miracle. And how quickly we forget. And he was looking at somebody who's just was rolling his eyes like, yeah, this isn't working. And he's thinking, this has been available for a couple of hours. This is the beginning of time. Maybe give it a minute.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's part of the problem is, like you said, taking things for granted. We get, as soon as they become available, we take them for granted, which is why I think part of gratitude is noticing and not becoming accustomed to something. And I remember in that book, I was waiting in line at the coffee store and I forced myself to notice. I was like, oh, look at that. That light bulb is a lovely shade of blue, like indigo. And I would never have noticed that. And I actually talked about this in the puzzle book as well, because visual puzzles actually, I think, have something to teach us, like the Where's Waldo genre.
Totally.
Are you a Where's Waldo? And by the way, fun fact, Where's Waldo is one of the top 100 most banned books, according to the American Library Association, which I was like, because apparently, I looked into it, apparently in like one version, they had a beach scene and they had a picture of a little woman and her bikini had become undone and you could sort of see some side boob. And that was enough that some person's mother found that offensive and had it
The
banned.
things that gave us life and sustained our lives is considered offensive. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did not see it as an erotic thing. I looked at it, I was like, this does not bother me. But anyway, that's a little side note. I love the
I'm sorry, a little
lesson.
side note about side boob, but keep going.
Good one, good one. The lesson I love about Where's Waldo is sometimes I will try to just look out. I'm looking out my window now and pretend that it's a Where's Waldo scene and just focus on all the fun details that I take for granted. And I'm looking now at this crazy design on the side of the building that sort of looks like a starfish, and just noticing that, because we get so accustomed to things, whether it's visual or whether it's touch or hearing, that we just don't notice it. And I think once you notice it, that leads to gratitude.
Couldn't agree more. We habituate to.
Oh, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
And just last night, I was entering my house after walking my dog, and I, for the first time in some time, actually recognized, wow, I mean, although the bank still owns a portion of my home, I am what's called a homeowner. That's pretty incredible.
That's amazing.
Let's talk about some of the quiet prompts. Maybe you've never even articulated them before, but what are some of the prompts that go through your head to alert you to be curious or grateful?
That is a good one. Well, let me look. I'm going to open up I keep a little list of prompts and thoughts. And all right, so let's see. Here's one: talking to myself out loud. I try, which sounds a little weird, but
No.
I feel that I don't trust my brain. My brain will go to weird places and dark. It's got the negative bias. It'll find the worst thing in my life and just focus on it. But if I say it out loud and say, like, now I'm thinking of how that guy was rude to me online at the hardware store, then I hear myself say it. And I'm like, you know what? You're better than, you should not be wasting your time with that. So it's vocalizing it, and you hear how dumb your thoughts are, and then you're able to adjust. And likewise, you can say, my God, I'm looking out here and it's sunny and I'm safe. I'm under a roof and I have water. So just saying those things reminds me and really drives it home. Nowadays, I don't look as crazy because people are talking on their cell phones. I've been doing it long enough that I used to look crazy. I am a big fan of talking to myself out loud. So what's your take on that as a professional?
First of all, I think that's genius. And I think about Marshall Linehan, the creator of dialectical behavioral therapy, who came up with a notion called the wise mind. The wise mind is this beautiful Venn diagram, the fusion of embracing our emotional intelligence as well as our intellectual intelligence. And what you've basically done is created an Obi-Wan Kenobi on your shoulder in the form of a wise mind, something that you can articulate out loud and you'll hear yourself. And by forcing yourself to externalize the voice and being willing to perhaps even get some stares, because why is this guy talking to himself? But you're causing yourself to engage your wise mind. A lot of people walk around with the WWJD, what would Jesus do, bracelets on their arm. And these are good evocations. Another one is I try to be the person my dog thinks I am. And by being able to hear that wise mind of yours and embrace your best self in that moment. So the guy at Walgreens was rude to you, and you're able to hit Control Alt Delete and say, I'm going to override my basic system defaults and listen to smarter AJ. And you've also described yourself as kind of that Native American version of the two wolves who reside within us. One's evil and one's good. And whichever one we feed is the one that will dictate what we do next. And you've described it as your internal Mr. Rogers and Larry David, which I thought was perfect. And I totally resonate with those two guys because I have both of them too.
Yes, exactly. They are the wolves. They are the wolves come to life. Can I give you another prompt that I use? Because this one is, I don't know if this will work for everyone. And this may actually backfire for some people, but it works for me. Just the idea of memento mori, that life is short, and that really drives home. I cannot be wasting my time obsessing about the rude Walgreens clerk. I'm not on this world for very long, and I've got to really make the most of it. And I have something that might be considered macabre, but I have on my computer, my screensaver, I have thousands of photos. And most of them are happy photos of my kids, going to Disney World or whatever. But every time I have a friend who dies, I put their photo in the rotation. One, because I like to remember them. And it reminds me, oh, this was a good person. I'm glad I got to know him. But it has the simultaneous effect of being like, oh yeah, this could be me. There's no guarantee I'm going to be around for a long time. So I better stop sweating the small stuff. So that's one of the sort of, I don't know, hacks or tricks or strategies I use. What do you think of that one as a professional?
I think the memento mori drill is a classic. It's been around since at least the ancient Romans, when somebody would remind the new victor by whispering in his ear. Apparently that was a paid slave or paid individual. Somebody was saying, memento mori, you will die, you will die. And that's such an important way to embrace life. I know the Masons make it a practice to go into a contemplative room where there's a skull and I believe a clock or something like that. But the idea of recognizing that we basically have, my grandpa used to say, if I die, it's like, no, when I die, we know death and taxes are realities. And the idea that I've come up with is the iPhone battery and the recognition that I am at a stage in life. I've crossed the Rubicon, and we're going super Roman today. And I've crossed the Rubicon of 50. And the fact is, the life left on my battery is not what it was when I was 18. And even then, it wasn't guaranteed.
Do you have it on the yellow, the save battery?
I don't, but I try to remind myself of that when I'm at my best. That's a really important thing to remind yourself of. And to get even creepier still, and going back to Rome, there's this place that you can go where the Capuchin monks were the people who actually gave the name to cappuccino and the Capuchin monkeys, believe it or not, because of their little caps of cappuccino. That Ross from Friends, and speaking of memento mori, my gosh, Matthew Perry, he seemed like the kind of guy who would never die. And he's died relatively young due to in this era, I should say. But in Rome, you can see these places where the Capuchin monks have basically given their skeletons, and they are presented in various ways. And there was one really creepy sign that said basically in front of the skeleton, where you stand, we stood, where we are now, you will be.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, that's powerful. Holy moly. Interesting.
And so the fact is, this is something that we repress from our consciousness, the memento mori, but it's true. And I love the existential psychologists who remind us to embrace life and try to live fully, and to try to be like Nikos Kazantzakis and make sure that we leave this planet kind of a destroyed castle, like we leave it all on the field.
Yeah, I had not thought of that, because I'm always thinking like trying to leave, like camping, leave it better than,
certainly leave the world better, but we're supposed to use everything we've got.
Use all your energy. Gotcha,
I'm not talking about combust a whole bunch of smoke and leave the world a crappy place.
Don't
you can still think about the seventh generation and still use everything you've got. And
right. The other thing I have, as you may know, I've been writing this book about living the year of living constitutionally. And part of it is to see what wisdom there was from our founding fathers. A lot of the mindset then we don't want to get back to. It was sexist, racist, anti-Semitic. It was homophobic. It was smelly. People died in childbirth. It was just not many things we don't want to return to. But there were some aspects. And one of them, I think, is this idea of virtue, of committing to the general welfare and sacrificing yourself for the greater good. And I like that. So Benjamin Franklin had a list of things that he did every day. And the first thing he did when he woke up was he said to himself, what good can I do today? What good can I accomplish today? I love that, because doing good is paradoxically one of the best things that you can do for your own happiness. And I love that it turned out that way, that evolution gave us that warm glow when we do good things. So yeah, trying to embrace that has been another important part. of my,
And what a perfect person for you. When I think about Benjamin Franklin, when I think about Leonardo da Vinci, when I think about particularly Benjamin Franklin, I think of him as having kind of a perpetual wink in his eye, a lot of gratitude, a lot of curiosity, a lot of charm, a lot of willingness to engage people who might be on the other side of the aisle. That is definitely you. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about curiosity and how it led you to this latest project of living constitutionally. Is it too early for us to talk about it? Can we talk a little bit?
I'll get in trouble with my publishers if I talk too much, but I do want to say this. This one, again, fueled by curiosity, because the Constitution is at the heart of politics. It's the heart of the culture wars, and I wanted to explore it. So I thought one way to explore it would be to do what I did with the Bible, which was basically live it. So I expressed my rights as they were in the original Constitution, whether it's carrying muskets, writing pamphlets with quill pens, quartering soldiers in my New York City apartment, all of that. And one thing, these are very stressful times, and one of the few things that's making me feel better is trying to do something, act in some way that spreads light. And so one thing that has been keeping me sane these last couple of weeks is a project, and I don't know when you're going to run this, but I'm reviving the election cake. It was a ritual from the 1700s where voting was much more festive, at least for those lucky few who could vote. It was a much more festive, and people would bake cakes, a lot of rum punch. So I'll do a little of the rum punch, but I'm focusing mostly on the cakes. And I have this project where I've gotten at least one person in every state, all 50 states, to bake an election cake. And they're just so creative. Like the cake from Maine has a lobster on it. And so everyone's doing their own little spin. And it's just bringing me such joy because it's this little, it's not going to save democracy on its own, but it's like a little tiny thing that I can do to help in some small way. And that has been such a joy these past few weeks.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I want to just go into something and just kind of shine a different light on something that you said. And that is that you said you would die rather quickly. Your self-concept is that you are kind of a beta. And I would actually argue that even though you don't rock the body of The Rock or John Cena, you are absolutely a beast of a stuntman. And I'm going to qualify that because this is how I see you. You showed up at the Academy Awards pretending to be someone else. And you have pretended to stone an adulterer, or you actually kind of stoned an adulterer in Central Park while you were living biblically. You threw tiny pebbles at him, but still you did it. And you did something that you described as the most excruciating of all the stunts you've pulled, and that was practicing radical honesty. Oof. And saying some awful things to people. So I would actually say that your curiosity has actually led you to be just a wild. I mean, like if you think about Johnny Knoxville on Jackass, you've done some stunts. You haven't done physical stunts, but you've done stunts, dude.
That is a lovely thought. Yeah. I'm very flattered. I love that. And I think you're right. I think it's dangerous to say this person is alpha, this person is beta. And I was doing it to myself. But I actually think it's much more fluid than that. In some situations, we're all alphas and some we're all betas. And let's not pigeonhole everyone. And sometimes I act as if I'm an alpha, even though I might be feeling beta. So that's when, I force myself to do something crazy, like whatever it is, throwing the world's largest family reunion. It's always a lot about acting as if. Oh, by the way, because I have to actually go soon too. There's a call from my son who's away. But I wanted to tell you, I'm very excited because as my new project is the Puzzler Podcast,
yes,
which is like a daily podcast. Like we have a celebrity guest and we give them a fun puzzle for just 5 minutes. And they're all these word puzzles. And I was very excited because I put Adam Dorsey into the anagram machine and to mix up the letters. And I found one that I thought was a nice one. And you brought up Star Wars earlier, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your name, if you rearrange the letters, is Madras Yoda.
No way.
A Yoda with like colorful clothing. I'm going to get that for a gift for you next time we see each other in person. I'm going to get you a colorfully clothed Yoda, and
AJ,
that's your Madras
share
Yoda.
something with you right now that is going to blow your mind. I mean, you see me laughing because I'm so happy to be with you. I can't even describe the joy. If any of you ever gets to talk to AJ, it's the most delightful thing you could ever want. The cat that got me out of hating cats.
Oh,
and his name was Yoda.
No way.
And he is in this little box, and I keep him with me. It's been 22 years since he died, nearly. And he was the one who busted me into the feline club, which I previously hated cats. So the idea of a Madras Yoda makes me just so happy. So thank you for that. AJ, I'm just going to close with this one short question, and that is, how have your children benefited from your curiosity?
It'd be interesting to ask them, because they might say that there are pros and cons. But I do think they are very intellectually curious, which I love. And I do think that they have been good at coming along on some of my adventures. So for the puzzle book, we went to Spain and participated as Team USA in the World Jigsaw Puzzle Championship. And we were terrible. It was a disaster. We were second to last, but we had a blast. Oh yeah, we didn't even get the booby prize because we were second to last.
I thought in Japan, at least, the booby prize, believe it or not, is second to last.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, anyway, we had a blast, and I do love that. That is one thing I've instilled in them that I hope that they take with them. Because I do think, as you said earlier, gratitude and curiosity, like those two are huge columns in our quest for happiness.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for sharing your most precious of belongings, and that is your time with us. And
my pleasure.
My listeners are going to be more curious, more grateful as a result of having listened to this podcast, and it will actually have legs because, let's face it, they will pass it on.
Love it. Well, my pleasure. It's a highlight of my month. So anytime you want me back, I am there.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.